Every year, the Slay the Spire modding community has been coming together to make an anniversary mod. There have been 7 of these anniversary mods so far, but my favorite of the bunch is Spire Biomes. The gist of Spire Biomes is that it adds several zones around the game's map, which each have their own unique rule sets and gimmicks. I would say that Spire Biomes actually makes the game slightly more difficult overall, even if you spend dozens of hours familiarizing yourself with all the different biomes. So, to help you out, here is one tip for every Spire biome as of version 1.4.8. For Ambushed, your life will be a lot easier if you go into it with any potion that can target enemies. I would say Fire Potion is the best option though. Not only can potions reorient yourself in case of an emergency, but a Fire Potion can help burst down one of the 2 enemies that are always present in ambushed fights. Beast's Lair is actually a really difficult biome. It's just a single event node that forces you to fight a boss from the previous act, but it's buffed in several significant ways. This biome can appear in either Act 2 or 3, and while rewarding, my advice will be to avoid this biome if you see it in Act 2. Act 2 is already very difficult, and unless you are way ahead of the power curve, the rewards from defeating the boss typically aren't worth it, given how each Act 1 boss specifically benefits from each of the biome's modifications. Guardian's multi-hit attacks will rapidly become more dangerous. Hexaghost's turn 2 attack is just brutal, and it's difficult to mitigate thanks to the artifact it starts with. And Slimeboss's minions will receive the biome's unique buffs as well when it splits. Save this biome for Act 3. For Broken Space, while the main appeal of this biome may initially appear to be the unique broken relics you get from elites, you shouldn't sleep on normal combats either. You get 2 card rewards per fight here, and while they can be of any color, making them more unreliable, the rarity is consistent. Even without Question Card or Prayer Wheel, there's nearly a 90% chance for you to see at least 1 rare card in the card rewards here, so it's a great biome to path to if you're looking for a power boost of some kind. If Candyland contains a merchant, it will always have Lee's Waffle available for purchase, even if you already saw Lee's Waffle earlier in the run. Keep an eye out for this if you need a full heal. Home of Another Character is a fantastic biome to travel to, especially if it has an event node, as that gives you the chance to fight a weakened elite to get the respective character's starter relic, most of which are incredible. With the exception of Defect's Cracked Core, which is basically just a worse version of Mercury Hourglass. Card rewards also come from the chosen character, and the base game characters usually have absolutely broken interclass combos, such as Ironclad's Dark Embrace and Silent's Blade Dance. So basically, my tip is to go here and look for unique combos, as long as the biome doesn't say Home of the Defect. At the start of combat in the Divinities Gaze biome, a random unique card is shuffled into your draw pile, as well as some status cards. If you are playing as the Ironclad and see this biome coming up on the map, consider picking up Evolve or Fire Breathing to make use of the status cards that come with this biome. The Frostlands biome in Act 2 features a very rewarding event with a unique fight containing 3 enemies: Coal, Spruce, and Hypothema. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Coal is a defensive enemy, giving lots of block to everyone and making you weak. Hypothema scales everyone's strength, and Spruce just kind of sits there doing consistent single attacks. My recommended order in which to defeat these enemies is as follows: Coal, then Hypothema, then Spruce. With Coal present, defeating any enemy will be tough, which is why you want them gone first. And once Hypothema is also gone, Spruce is pretty free. In the Golden Curse biome, I wouldn't go here unless you can defeat some elites. Elites drop an extra relic, and even if you can only afford 1, having a choice between relics is very strong. Additionally, paying 30 gold just to see a card reward isn't ever worth it in my opinion, unless it's an elite card reward, as those have a higher chance of containing rare cards. Grass is unique in that it's the only strictly positive biome in Spire biomes. All other things being equal, there is no reason to not go here. Just remember to look at the crops available, and remember that it's often worth saving your energy to grow them. In Gravewood Grove, you draw 1 less card per turn, but you gain the power of the Dead Branch relic in every combat. Additionally, the first card you play each turn will exhaust. Overall, this biome's effects are very strong. My tip would be to make the most out of this and think about your card order before you execute it. Try to avoid playing powers and cards that exhaust anyway first on your turn, as it will bypass the benefit of giving you another random card. In the Gremlin Camp biome, you cannot rest at rest sites. However, you do have a unique option, Scavenge, which gives you about 48 gold on average. Personally, I think Scavenge is a trap. Typically, I would be thrilled to sacrifice 48 gold to get an upgrade of my choosing, especially early on, so smithing is usually the better option. though there is an exception to be made if you have a shop coming up and the extra gold will put you over the threshold for a relic. I have played a lot of Spire biomes, and over time I've come to realize that Gremlin Town is by far the most punishing biome, which is actually kind of impressive considering the humility biome exists. Gremlin Town replaces card rewards with unique Gremlin cards, which, well, fine, aren't usually as reliable as your own class's cards or even colorless cards. Additionally, the elite fights here are beyond brutal, including a Gremlin Elder who has about as much health as a boss and gives you 3 decay curses permanently if you can't burst them down fast enough. And there's also a ridiculous horde fight where you are surrounded and have to fight about 20 gremlins who constantly spawn. A recent comment on this mod's Steam Workshop page basically sums up my thoughts on this. Gremlin Town's biome size is fairly large, but my advice would be to spend as little time in this biome as possible. And no matter what you do not take elite fights here unless you were ridiculously ahead of the power curve. Heavenly Clouds gives all enemies the power of flight. This is surprisingly useful to you because it means just 3 or 4 attacks on a single enemy will stun them for the turn. If you see Heavenly Clouds coming up on the map, consider taking some cheap attacks or cards that generate multiple attacks to more reliably stun the enemies here. Humility is absolutely vicious. Every enemy gets a unique buff, some more impactful than others. This biome is based on the Humility mod, which conveniently has a GitHub page listing the unique buffs for every enemy. My advice is this: avoid Humility at all costs in Act 1, avoid elite fights in Act 2, and Act 3 probably has the most manageable buffs, so it's relatively safe there. Invasion is the biome with the most content, adding over 20 unique enemies as well as several unique cards. The content here is divided between acts, meaning the Act 1 invasion enemies are entirely different from the Act 3 invasion enemies. However, you should be aware that the elite rewards also vary between acts. Invasion elites will drop a special card reward instead of relics here. I don't think the possible Act 1 cards are anything special, but Act 2 guarantees that you see some of the Blade cards, all of which are universally powerful. Additionally, Act 3 throws some rare colorless cards into the reward pool, and the logic dictates that you have about a 90% chance of seeing at least one of the following after an elite fight: Apotheosis, Secret Technique, and Master of Strategy. I know all of that wasn't necessarily a tip as much as it was an info dump, but hopefully it will allow you to make more informed decisions. In the Junkyard, you receive 1 more card reward after combat, but you are forced to take a card from all card rewards before proceeding. Before taking a card, I would highly recommend taking a look at all the rewards. Oftentimes, a combination of cards will be stronger than a single card that you were considering. Even people with dozens of hours in Spire biomes are unlikely to be aware that the Keymaster biome even exists. It does come with a nice set of benefits, but it only has a chance to spawn if you have collected all 3 of the key pieces. What makes this so specific is that not only do you need to be going for Corrupt Heart to consider collecting the key pieces, but most top players recommend being biased towards gathering the key pieces in Act 3, especially the Sapphire and Ruby keys. And if you don't collect them until Act 3 like you probably should, Keymaster won't even have a chance to spawn. While this is a neat secret biome, it's very rarely, if ever, worth collecting all the keys early to gamble on this spawning. So, to summarize, my tip is, be aware that this exists, and also, you should probably go back to pretending that this doesn't exist. Mana Surge contains one of the most powerful events in Spire biomes, which can give you any of the 3 egg relics in exchange for 2 of your cards at random becoming blighted, meaning they permanently gain a unique negative effect when played. If you have a specific card that you really don't want to gain a blight, you can use the biome-specific enchant option on it at a rest site beforehand, as cards that are enchanted cannot be affected by a blight. In the Mirror biome, if you see an event node, the event is guaranteed to be one where you can duplicate any card in your deck. This is not only extremely powerful, especially if you plan around it, but it also gives you an excuse to kickstart that claw deck you've always dreamed of. The Monster Zoo biome gives 2 strength to all enemies in combat, but you receive an extra card in card rewards, and it heavily increases the chance for cards in rewards to be upgraded. What you may not realize is that this can also upgrade rare cards, which usually cannot otherwise naturally appear upgraded without an egg relic. Definitely consider taking elite fights here to increase your chance of seeing an upgraded rare card. The Pack Attack biome only appears if you have the Packmaster mod active as well. Regardless of whether or not you are playing as the Packmaster, you need to have decent knowledge of all Packmaster packs and their cards to make an informed decision. Not much else to say here, just hover over the biome, take a look at which packs are offered, and decide whether or not the cards are better on average than your own class's cards. In Smith's Folly, your rarest card is upgraded upon entering and exiting the biome. The vast majority of the time, because this biome doesn't allow side connections on the map, this equals 2 upgrades. However, if you have the Wing Boot relic, you can weave in and out of the biome repeatedly to double that and get 4 upgrades instead. The Storm biome can be really dangerous early on because the Conduit effect can hit you for 6 unavoidable damage, which adds up fast. But the odds of you receiving Conduit decrease if there are more enemies alive, since Conduit is just applied to a random actor on the field. It's situational, but if it makes sense to do so, consider leaving enemies alive while you whittle everyone else down to avoid the damage from Conduit. The Fog offers more events than you probably should take, so this isn't a very appealing biome. However, it does have a unique event with some fairly powerful options. My tip is that if you run into this event early, consider losing some HP to get the Standing Stone Fragment relic. Even though this relic's effect is limited, the extra energy per turn can allow you to take on more elites later on in the act, so you can start snowballing power. The final node of the Thieves Hideout biome will always be a specific event with one combat followed by an optional second combat. If you have a smoke bomb, you can use it to skip the first fight of this event with no penalty, so you can preserve as many resources as you can for the more difficult second fight. Volatile Grounds hold a lot of enemies that explode for a lot of damage after some time. My tip would be to avoid this biome if you don't have burst damage. Slower decks that rely heavily on scaling simply aren't fast enough, and you won't be able to prevent the enemies from exploding. The Wildfire biome is one of the most beneficial biomes available to you, entirely because of the fact that every card in card rewards will have a modifier that applies the burning debuff to enemies. Not only is burning incredibly strong in its own right, but it's fantastic for stripping artifact off of enemies later on in the game, so definitely take some cards from this biome if you don't have an answer to artifact yet. And finally, Windy. A biome I find both hilarious and infuriating. Enemies will blow away once they get to 10% of their max HP. My advice would be to keep this in mind, especially if you have cards such as Feed or relics such as Gremlin Horn, as enemies who get carried away by the wind will not activate fatal effects. And that's it. I hope you learned something from this video, and I hope some of my tips help you out in your future Spire Biomes runs. Farewell.